They told me right there at the Thanksgiving table that unless I returned the $60,000 I gave them to save the family home, I was no longer part of the family. No seat, no name. Just gone. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a forensic accountant, and apparently the scapegoat in my own family. But what they didn't expect was that I kept every receipt, every signature, and the security footage. So I hit play right in front of the turkey. What would you have done if your own mother just stared and said nothing? Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do by the people you loved most? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. It started with pie photos. I was sitting on my couch, feet curled under a knit blanket mug of lukewarm chamomile tea balanced on my thigh when the family group chat lit up. First came Lily's photo, a perfectly latticed apple pie, cooling beside a name card handwritten, of course. Then Brandon chimed in with a picture of his famous stuffing captioned, "Hope someone saved room." Then a flood, candied yams green bean casserole, a decorative turkey centerpiece that looked like it had taken hours. I scrolled, not knowing exactly what I was looking for, until I realized what wasn't there. No one had asked what I was bringing. No one had asked if I was coming. I blinked at the screen, heart thudding too loud for such a quiet afternoon. My fingers hovered, then tapped into the message history. No address sent. No calendar invite. No Rachel, can you bring the cranberry sauce? Nothing. Just updates flowing around me like I didn't exist. Then a buzz. A text from Aunt Carla. "Hey, sweetheart. Are you still coming to Thanksgiving? Just saw the table list, didn't see your name." I reread her message 3 times. The polite tone, the ellipses. I stared out the window for a beat too long, watching gray clouds stretch over the Boston skyline like a thin blanket refusing to cover enough. "They erased me," I murmured to no one. I tapped out a short message to Mom. "Hey, just wondering what time I should come by next week. Didn't see the invite." Read. No reply, no dots, no typing bubble, just nothing. The jazz playing softly from my record player suddenly felt like a laugh track to my own confusion. I set down the mug, crossed the room, and pulled open the cabinet where I kept my files. My fingers found the folder immediately green, slightly bent at the corner, labeled in my own neat handwriting, "Family Transfers." I hadn't opened it since last year. Inside were 3 documents, all from my bank, all labeled "Outgoing Wire Transfer," all totaling $60,000. 3 separate deposits spaced out over 2 weeks, each one draining a chunk of my savings. I'd made them quietly without drama after Mom had called crying about the risk of foreclosure. It had been her house, our house, the one Dad fixed the gutters on every fall until his hands stiffened with age. The one where we carved pumpkins and shoveled too many New England driveways. I hadn't expected a parade or even a thank you card, but I also didn't expect to be erased. A ping interrupted my thoughts. I looked down. It was a DM from Lindsay, my cousin from upstate. "Wait, you're not coming? Thought you were bringing the turkey again." The turkey. I brought it every year. Even the year Dad died, even when I had to take the red eye from a client audit in Denver and nearly passed out basting. It was tradition. A thankless one, maybe. But mine. And now I wasn't even considered. I closed the folder gently. Not slammed, not tossed, just closed. Then I stood in the kitchen, staring at my own reflection in the microwave door. A warped image, eyes too wide, mouth slightly parted. I didn't look angry. I looked resolved. I whispered, "Not this time." From the living room, my phone screen dimmed to reveal my wallpaper, a quote Dad used to write at the bottom of every birthday card: "Integrity is lonely, but clean." I took a deep breath, and this time it didn't catch in my throat. I still remember the sound of Mom's voice that day, tight, tearful, balancing somewhere between desperation and guilt. It was a Tuesday in late April 2022, and I had just stepped out of a client meeting when the call came through. I ducked into a hallway lined with tired vending machines and flickering ceiling lights. Mom never called during the workday. "Rachel," she began without preamble. "I don't want to scare you, but I got another notice. Final one," they said. "About the house." There was a pause. No sobbing, just the controlled unraveling of someone used to managing appearances. They said if we don't come up with $18,000 by Friday, it moves to pre-foreclosure, she continued. I've maxed the cards. There's no way I can— Her voice cracked then. Not dramatically, but just enough to fold the air between us. I leaned against the wall. I can help. Let me see what I can move around. That was all it took. Not a full plan, not a question about how we got to this point. Just a promise, an offer, a reflex, like a daughter with muscle memory for saving things that weren't hers to save. 2 days later, Brandon called. Smooth as ever. We just need a bridge loan, he said. You're the only one who can swing this without repercussions. Repercussions like losing the house Mom grew up in, he said, voice dripping with a practiced ache. You know how much it means to her. And just like that, the guilt became collective. I wasn't helping anymore. I was fulfilling an obligation. Over the next 2 weeks, I transferred $60,000 in 3 separate payments. Quietly. No drama. I canceled the trip to Portugal I had been planning with Kayla. Told my therapist I needed to take a break 6 months, it turned out. I even postponed moving into a bigger place closer to the river. I told myself it was fine. Family first. Right, the thank you text from Mom came late, 2 days after the final transfer. It read, "We got it. Hopefully things get easier from here. Love you." No call, no voicemail, just 3 lines of lowercase gratitude. Then came summer, and with it the barbecue. It was Brandon's idea, a celebration of normalcy as he called it. Long tables, string lights, catered ribs, and enough sangria to dissolve any lingering awkwardness. Except awkwardness didn't melt it, fermented. I stood near the grill when I overheard him laughing with one of his buddies. She just needed to feel useful, making up for not being around when Dad was sick. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. I turned to refill my lemonade and caught Lily snapping a selfie with a drink in one hand and a brand new iPhone in the other latest model lavender case. Her heels sunk slightly into the grass as she struck a pose. I noticed the gold watch, the handbag that had a logo stitched into every inch. Designer. I'd seen it in an ad between YouTube clips on budgeting. I said nothing. Just smiled when someone passed me the grilled corn. Pretended not to notice the way Lily nudged the photo toward me as if I were expected to comment. Later in the bathroom, I stared at my own reflection, trying to reconcile the flush on my cheeks with the cool water running through my fingers. I didn't want to believe it then, not fully. Not yet. Back in Boston, I buried the unease under deadlines and case files. Buried it until this week, until the Thanksgiving exclusion cracked everything wide open. That night, I reopened the folder, the one marked Family Transfers, 3 receipts still crisp, one for $18,000, another for $22,000, the last for $20,000, all labeled Emergency for House, all mine. I had never asked to be paid back, not once. I just assumed no one would pretend it hadn't happened. But they had. The worst betrayals don't come with slamming doors. They come with silence and empty chairs. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Amtrak site. One-way ticket, Boston to Raleigh Thanksgiving morning. First class. Not because I needed luxury, just the buffer of space. Space to think. As I clicked confirm, I glanced at the post-it note stuck to my monitor. A quote from my favorite professor in College Family is not defined by who you're bound to, but by who refuses to let you carry the weight alone. Apparently mine had redefined it a long time ago. Carol's door opened with a soft creak and a gasp. She stood in the entryway, apron still tied around her waist, cinnamon on her wrists like perfume. Her eyes blinked once, twice, and then she forced a smile that didn't quite touch her cheeks. "Rachel," she said, voice neutral. "We weren't expecting you. That's the pattern." I replied, brushing past her before she could finish forming an excuse. "But it's Thanksgiving. I brought dessert." I didn't. Unless you counted the folder inside my bag, zippered tight, like a sealed testimony. My heels clicked softly against the polished wood floors as I entered the living room. The house smelled of sage and sugar, same as every year. The table was dressed to impress white linen, polished silver-tapered candles burning low. There were 7 name cards neatly placed. None said mine. Lily looked up from her phone, her expression registering a half-second of surprise before settling into something more polished. "Oh," she said. "You're here." Brandon, seated at the head of the table as if he had inherited Dad's chair, along with his misplaced confidence, raised his glass slightly. "Didn't think you were coming. I didn't think I was invited," I answered, taking the seat at the far end where no card waited but space allowed. Carol hovered for a moment before returning to the kitchen. Sam offered me a small smile. Ethan barely looked up from his plate, though his fingers fidgeted with the edge of his napkin. Dinner passed like theater. Small talk about Lily's new job at a boutique with brand potential, Brandon's promotion again, Carol's knee feeling better thanks to cortisone. No one asked about my work. No one asked about me. When dessert was served, pecan pie, of course, I reached for the knife to slice a piece. That's when Brandon cleared his throat. "We need to talk about the money," he said, setting his fork down with a deliberate clink. The room stilled. Carol's eyes didn't leave her plate. Lily straightened slightly, her voice sugar-dipped but sharp. "It was supposed to be a loan, Rachel. You never paid Mom back." My hand froze over the pie. I turned my gaze slowly to my brother, then to my sister. "What loan?" I asked carefully. "The 60 grand, Brandon said. "From last year. For the house. You told Mom you'd handle it, and now she's been left in the lurch. She hasn't said anything," I said, studying Carol. "Mom," Carol shifted, took a long sip of her tea. "I didn't want to cause trouble." "You're not," I said. "They are." I reached into my bag, unzipped the folder, and pulled out the paperwork. 3 documents. Crisp, chronological, notarized. I laid them on the table, one by one. April 22nd, 18,000. April 29th, 22. May 5th, 20. Total 60,000 from my savings account. Labeled for one purpose, saving this house. I looked at Brandon, then Lily, then finally Carol. "You mean this money?" Carol's lip quivered. Ethan's fork clattered onto his plate. Lily laughed, but it cracked at the end. "That's not proof of anything. You always made things transactional. That's what you called me, remember?" I said, voice calm. "Transactional. Like wanting acknowledgement makes me petty. Like keeping records makes me cold." Brandon leaned back. "You've always needed to control everything. That's the real issue here." Sam shifted slightly. "Control? She's showing us the actual transfers." I turned to her. "Thanks, Sam." "No," she said quietly. "I mean it." "I didn't know you gave that much." Brandon snapped Sam, "Stay out of it." Ethan looked up then. "Is that why I had to say you were with me at the bank?" Silence. Heavy, thick. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice dipping. Ethan blinked. "Dad said it was just a little joke, that no one would check." Carol dropped her fork. Lily muttered, "Oh my God." Brandon stood, chair scraping backward. "That's enough. We're not doing this right now." I pulled out my phone and laid it next to the receipts. "Actually, we are." I tapped the screen. The screen glowed to life, a video cued, and paused. Brandon's face turned gray. "Should we watch something together?" I asked, smiling. Not cruel, not smug. Just ready. No one answered. Even the candles seemed to flicker with hesitation. Ethan's breath hitched softly. Sam placed her hand on his silently. Across the table, my mother looked at me not with anger or shame or even confusion. Just something tired, something old, something that recognized finally that this time the eldest wasn't the one being protected. She was the one protecting the truth. The silence that followed my offer was almost reverent, like the seconds before a verdict is read aloud. Brandon's posture stiffened, Lily's knuckles whitened around her water glass, and Sam slowly placed her fork down, eyes trained on me like she was seeing something unfamiliar. I connected my phone to the living room TV, the screen blinking to life as I swiped to the first file. The screen displayed a paused security camera feed, grainy, time-stamped, unmistakable. October 15th, I said, my voice calm. 2:15 p.m., First National Bank downtown branch. Brandon's laugh came too quick. Too thin. "Seriously, you're pulling security footage on your own family. You said it was a loan," I replied, scrolling to the overlay my firm's fraud analysis summary. "Let's see who made the withdrawals." I pressed play. There they were. Brandon in his favorite navy pea coat at the teller window, a slip of paper in hand. Lily hovered behind him, tapping nervously on her phone. They weren't wearing masks, didn't even glance at the camera. I zoomed in on the signature on the withdrawal form. "That's Mom's name," I said, pulling up a side-by-side comparison. "But it's not her signature." Stroke inconsistency pressure, anomalies slant direction. Classic forgery. Brandon rolled his eyes. "You're reading too much into this. You know how easy it is to doctor this stuff?" Sam's head turned slowly in his direction. "Wait, you told me Rachel was spinning this out of nothing, that she was paranoid, that none of it added up." He hesitated. "She is. This is just her getting creative." "I'm a forensic accountant," I reminded him. "I literally get paid to track fraud." Lily stood abruptly, voice cracking. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. That's what people always say," I said. "But the truth has no volume control. It's either silent or screaming." Ethan looked like he might cry. His gaze flickered from his dad to me and back again. "You made me lie," he whispered. "You said it was a joke, that no one would care. You told me to say Aunt Rachel was with me that day." Brandon's mouth opened and closed, a fish flopping in the heat of his own collapsing story. "You used your son," Sam asked, voice raw. "You put our kid in this." The fireplace cracked loudly behind us, heat pressing into the corners of the room. No one moved. Lily sat down again, hard, her hands shaking. "I just wanted to feel equal," she murmured. "You've always been perfect, Rachel. Always had the answers. The degrees, the career, the clean apartment, Mom's approval. I thought if I helped him, we'd be even." "There's no even when you frame someone," I said, softer now. I turned to Carol. She hadn't said a word since the video started. "Mom, you didn't authorize these withdrawals. You didn't sign those forms. The bank just needs verbal confirmation. That's it. Then they move forward with pressing charges against the right people." I slid the final document across the table, my firm's internal report signed and dated, stamped in blue. It looked cold, clinical, unforgiving. Carol's fingers reached for it slowly, like touching something radioactive. Her lips parted, but no sound came. "You stole from me," she whispered, finally her voice barely more than air. "And blamed your sister." Brandon stood again. His face had gone mottled with red and disbelief. "You're just going to take her word for it, over your own son. She has proof," Carol said, staring at the page in front of her. "You have excuses." "I was trying to protect this family," he growled. "No," I said, "you were protecting yourself." Ethan shifted toward Sam, who wrapped her arm around his shoulders. He leaned into her without hesitation. Carol's fingers brushed the phone beside her plate. She picked it up, unlocked the screen. Brandon's glass slammed onto the table, loud and sudden amber liquid sloshing over the edge. "If you call, we're done." The room held its breath. Carol didn't flinch. Neither did I. I'd heard threats before, but this wasn't one. This was a declaration from a man watching his script unravel. She looked up at him steadier than I'd seen her in years. "Then, I guess," she said, "we're done." The phone call lasted 47 seconds. Carol sat at the head of the table, the cordless resting on speaker, her voice stripped of all its usual softness. Her plate, half covered in congealed gravy, and a slice of untouched pecan pie sat beside her elbow like an artifact from a forgotten celebration. "Yes," she said, voice low. "I confirmed the withdrawals were unauthorized. I didn't sign the forms." A pause. She swallowed audibly. "My daughter Rachel brought evidence." "Yes." "No, I wasn't aware until tonight." Click. Silence rushed in like a tide. Brandon's hands slammed onto the table, sending a fork skittering to the floor. "You're turning your back on your own son," he shouted, voice cracking in places it never used to. Carol stood slowly. "I'm turning my back on what you've become." His fists curled. "We're family." Sam stood too. Her voice was quieter but cut deeper. "You turned your back the moment you dragged our son into this mess." Ethan, still pressed against her side, wiped at his eyes with the cuff of his sleeve. "I'm sorry, Aunt Rachel," he whispered. I didn't understand. He said it didn't matter. I knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't know. You were doing what you thought kept things together. He nodded, shoulders shaking slightly, the weight of adult lies folding onto a 16-year-old frame. Lily leaned against the far wall, her arms wrapped around herself like armor. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, and her lips trembled when she finally spoke. "I was always invisible next to you," she said quietly. "The perfect one. The one with the job, and the degrees, and the photo frames in Mom's hallway. That's why I helped him. I wanted to matter." "You weren't invisible," I said, standing. "You were just dishonest." The words weren't cruel. They were simply true. Carol disappeared down the hallway and returned with a worn duffel bag, Dad's old one, from when he used to travel for weekend consulting jobs. She set it by the front door. "Brandon," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You need to leave tonight," he scoffed. "You're kicking me out. You forged my name. You stole from me, and then you asked your son to lie about it. You don't sleep under this roof anymore." His eyes darted toward Sam. "You're coming with me." She didn't move. Ethan looked up at her, confused. "Mom?" She crouched to his level. "I won't let you sleep in this tension another night. We'll go to a hotel. But this isn't over." He nodded, his expression unreadable. Brandon moved past me like a storm cloud with nowhere to pour. He yanked the duffel up and marched to the door. At the threshold, he turned. "If this goes public, I lose everything," he spat. "You already lost us," I said. He didn't respond. He just left. Carol closed the door gently behind him. She stood there for a long moment, her palm resting flat against the wood, like she was bracing it shut with her own weight. Sam and Ethan followed soon after, slipping into coats and quiet goodbyes. Ethan hugged me again, longer this time, his cheek brushing my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. "For real." "I know," I said. It takes strength to tell the truth. After they left, the house fell into a vacuum. The kitchen light hummed. The living room held its breath. The fireplace had gone out, and the plates on the table gleamed under dimmed bulbs frozen in a meal that would never be finished. Carol sat back down, her face a shade paler, but her spine straighter. "It's strange," she said softly, staring at the candle in the center of the table. "I always thought this family was just tired, worn around the edges. But it was cracked all along, wasn't it?" "Cracks don't start with the breaking," I said, lowering myself into the chair beside her. "They just finally become visible." She nodded. Her hand trembled as she reached for her tea, but she didn't hide it this time. She let it shake. I stayed quiet, letting the stillness stretch like fabric being mended. Then a blue hue bloomed faintly on the curtains. We both turned. Outside, police lights pulsed softly against the front window, red and blue bleeding into each other on the frost-speckled glass. Ethan's voice echoed from memory, fragile but direct. "Are they here for Dad?" Carol looked at me, eyes wide and shining, not with fear, but with something sadder. Acceptance, maybe. A mother's heartbreak she no longer needed to hide. I didn't answer. I simply reached over and placed my hand on hers. The front doorknob never turned. The lights dimmed and faded as the car rolled away. But we both knew. Some lines once crossed don't fade in the rearview. They stay visible. They stay drawn. The sun fell through the blinds in clean golden lines, striping the floor of my home office like light through the slats of memory. It was June now, sticky with summer, full of breath and bees, the kind of month that makes you believe maybe, just maybe, you've turned a corner. My desk sat by the window, a cup of iced tea, sweating beside my keyboard, the scent of basil drifting in from the windowsill planter. Across the screen blinked the homepage of the Lorraine Monroe Scholarship officially live. It had taken months of paperwork, quiet savings, a few late-night edits, and more than one tear-streaked pause. But it was done. Grandma always believed in planting things that would bloom after she was gone. I opened the inbox linked to the scholarship submissions. The first message had come in that morning. Subject line application from Anna Torres, Lowell High School. Her letter was short, a little clunky in grammar, but clear in heart. "No one in my family ever called me smart, but your story made me think maybe I am. You're the first person who made me feel like I could belong somewhere." I read it twice, then printed it. The paper was warm from the tray when I pinned it beside Grandma's old quote card. The same one she wrote me in high school, "You'll build what no one sees today. But one day, they'll see." The doorbell rang later that afternoon, mail delivery. I opened the box, and inside sat a thin envelope stamped with the state seal. A summary letter from the court system. Brandon had pled guilty to felony bank fraud and evidence tampering. Lily had accepted a plea for accessory to financial crime, resulting in 1 year of community service and restitution payments. The final note, both had declined the opportunity to appeal. I folded the letter and slipped it into a file marked Legal, Closed. In the top drawer of my desk was another box. No label, just matte navy bound with a thin cord. Inside were 2 sets of letters, one from Brandon, one from Lily. They'd started writing from the moment the sentencing became real. Most pages began with excuses, ended with apologies. I'd read none of them. Still, I kept the box. Not out of hope, not out of bitterness, just history. And because it reminded me of what I chose instead. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Guess what I got into the law program? You were right, I'd love this. Then another, because of you." I smiled and tapped back. "Make it count. You earned this." He was 15 when he lied. 16 when he broke. 17 now and choosing better. That mattered. I pulled out an old photo album after dinner, Dad's brown leather one, edges soft from time. The pages stuck in places, but there it was, my college graduation, all 5 of us squinting in the sunlight. Brandon in sunglasses, Lily mid-eye roll, me in the center beaming, Carol beside me, Dad's hand on my shoulder. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Then I slid it into a frame and tucked it in the drawer beneath the desk. I didn't need to hang it. Some memories you hold without display. Instead, I opened a new document, typed a note to myself. You kept your integrity. Even when they questioned your memory, even when they tried to steal your name, you stayed clean. I signed it, printed it, and placed it in the same drawer as the graduation photo. Outside, the city moved. Someone mowed a lawn. A car door slammed. My neighbor's wind chimes tinkled faintly in the breeze. I closed my laptop, poured another glass of tea, and stepped onto the balcony. A man across the way was watering his plants, elbow deep in basil and impatience. He looked up, caught my eye, and raised a hand. I raised mine back. The day was quiet. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. They may have replaced the photo, but they couldn't rewrite the truth. I still remember the warmth of my father's words, the weight of integrity, and the quiet strength it took to stand when no one clapped. In life, we don't always get to choose our beginnings, but we do get to choose who we become after the break. Sometimes healing starts not with forgiveness, but with boundaries. And love, when rooted in truth, finds its way back often in new forms. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your reflections. What has family meant to you, and how has that meaning changed?